This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
So we're all in the middle of watching the AFC Championship game. Lamar Jackson and Pat Mahomes go at it. And then at the end of the game, like literally the second Marquez Valdes-Scantling catches that ball and ends the Ravens season in front of Roquan Smith's wife and kids, by the way. Oh, man, somebody pray for Roquan. Woo! Woo! We get the news that drops that the Browns have signed Ken Dorsey to be their new offensive coordinator for this season. Now, before I know how I feel about it, I think I need more information about this. And I said this earlier in a Q&A about my feelings about the coaching, the OC hire is, I don't think there's any one hire you can do this offseason that would make me feel like it's a slam dunk home run the same way it was with Jim Schwartz. And that strictly has a lot to do with just the nature of that role on this team. Jim Schwartz is the head coach of the defense. That's what that search was looking for a head coach of the defense. That's not the situation with offensive coordinator, because we know that Kevin has some control over the offense and we don't know how that's going to be delineated. And I think a lot of the conversation about Ken Dorsey is going to really depend on how it's delineated and how that role is handled, because sometimes you can have a bad offensive coordinator in a role that's handled correctly and that offensive coordinator can be fine. Vice versa, we've seen this in Cleveland where you can have a good offensive coordinator like Todd Monken in a role that stinks under Freddie Kitchens and nobody gets anything that looks good. So it really does matter what the structure of this is. For those of you who aren't familiar with Ken Dorsey, which I imagine it's not very many people, a lot of us in Cleveland are familiar with Ken Dorsey for multiple reasons, right? Ken Dorsey was the quarterback of those Miami teams, or that Miami team that Ohio State beat. So for those of us who are Ohio State fans, they'll remember him from that. Ken Dorsey also played quarterback here sparingly for the Cleveland Browns in the 2010s. I think under, was it Daboll? Was he under Daboll? Let me know if I'm correct about that in the comment section. Did he play under Daboll? Was he under that Daboll offense with freaking Eric Mangenius? And it was just awful. That was an awful time to be a Browns fan. Let me tell you something. But Ken Dorsey, he's a former player, and that is the look. It seems like they've added 3 former players already, right? Deuce Staley, they brought in a former player as the defensive line coach. So the Browns also hired a defensive line coach too. That's a former player. They're adding former players in this coaching staff, which I don't think is a mistake. I think it's something that they saw had success when they hired Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone last year, and feel like can help, make things even better and more clear for these guys if you add more former players. Ken Dorsey, another former player that they have. Their tight ends coach that they added is another former player, former NFL quarterback. And it seems like this search for offensive coordinator came down to Ken Dorsey and I am blanking, Kellen Moore. So it's interesting to think that's been like a huge priority for the Cleveland Browns since they've released their first set of coordinators. Now, Ken Dorsey's history outside of his NFL time, he was in the league from 2003 to 2008. He was a Carolina Panthers quarterback coach for 5 years, from 2013 to 2017, where he oversaw some of the best years of Cam Newton. That's going to be something. Hold on to that nugget right there, right? 2013, 2017, Carolina's quarterback coach, Cam Newton. Right. That's pretty much the best years of Cam Newton that you get out of him there. Then he becomes the Buffalo Bills quarterback coach. And that's when you get start to get the most out of Josh Allen. And then in 2021, he became the passing game coordinator and then the offensive coordinator in 2022 to 2023. Obviously, he was fired this year. But the numbers for the Bills offense looked fine. It didn't seem like that was the issue. Now, the one thing with Ken Dorsey that I do have a criticism of is those rushing offenses under him were always underwhelming. And it did seem like once he left, they were able to run the ball a lot better. Like James Cook all of a sudden became one of the best running backs in the NFL once Ken Dorsey left. So this is where roles matter, because if Ken Dorsey is just here to really be in charge of the pass game and the Browns are going to have somebody really handle that run game, and they share responsibilities, like if it's like Tommy Rees running the run game and Ken Dorsey really in charge of a lot of the passing concepts with Kevin Stefanski overseeing it, or even Kevin Stefanski in charge of some of the run game stuff, then I think that this can work. The reason I think they went after Ken Dorsey is because he has a long track record of working with quarterbacks who play very similar to Deshaun Watson. When I'm talking about Deshaun Watson's style of play, I'm not talking about his body size. I'm not talking about how tall he is or how much he weighs. I'm talking about how he processes the game of football. And Deshaun Watson processes the game of football similar to Cam Newton, similar to Josh Allen, similar to CJ Stroud. When what I mean by that is Deshaun is not, let's get it there on time, right? That's Joe Flacco. That's Brock Purdy. Like, they really need to get it there on time. To an extent, even somebody like DTR on this team, he's more of a I need to get it there on time than I need to see it and process it. Deshaun is somebody who wants to sit back, see what's going on, and then once he sees it, he can get it there with a deadly accurate football and process it when he's playing at his highest level. And that's what you want to kind of morph the offense to. The Browns offense has kind of been catered towards somebody who can get the ball out on time versus somebody who is relying on seeing it and getting the ball downfield. Also, quarterbacks who like to attack vertically. You think of Cam Newton, him throwing the ball vertically. You think of Josh Allen, him throwing the ball vertically. Also, there's another thing that Deshaun Watson has in common with those other quarterbacks. Two guys that are hard to tackle. Deshaun Watson is deceptively hard to tackle. He's not the size of a Cam Newton or the size of a Josh Allen, but he's similarly hard to tackle. We've all seen him, even in his days in Cleveland, be able to break those tackles with ease that it doesn't look like he should be able to break at all, given his size and frame. But he's really good at that, same way that Cam Newton and Josh Allen are good at that, in the same way that you need to have things in place for the offense to be able to capitalize on somebody's ability to keep the play alive. If we're talking about how he fits with the current quarterback of this team, Ken Dorsey is very, very, very experienced in that, right? I think he has the right experience if we're talking about what his fit is with the quarterback. Again, experience with Cam Newton, experience with Josh Allen, and now Deshaun Watson will be somebody he's working with. Now, I know that some people were dead set on doing something that they did in 2020, just straight up going back to Tim Kelly or doing or Bill O'Brien and just doing what that worked in 2020. The reason I don't think that's a good strategy, in my opinion, is because I don't think you can rely on going back to doing something the same exact way you used to do it 5 years ago and thinking that's just going to work in the modern NFL. If you want Deshaun Watson to compete with the best quarterbacks in the AFC, he doesn't just have to get back to 2020. Quite frankly, he has to get better. He has to be better at not taking sacks. He has to be better at not turning the ball over. He has to be better in every aspect to compete with the top quarterbacks of the NFL, because the bar in 2020 for what a top 5 quarterback is different than what the bar is now, and it's simply much higher. All of the top 5 guys we're talking about, they've entered the league since Deshaun Watson's been out of it, since he's left Houston. So that whole thing about him used to be a top 5 quarterback, it really doesn't matter anymore, because even if he returns to that form, that is not good enough to be a top 5 quarterback in today's NFL and hell, in today's AFC. So if you want to get the most out of Deshaun Watson, if you want to get Deshaun Watson where, quite frankly, he needs to be for the Browns to win a Super Bowl, we We just saw it. Pat Mahomes is still there, reigning terror on the AFC. If you want to win against a guy like that, you need somebody playing at a very high level, and he ain't close to Pat right now. Deshaun Watson's nowhere. It's laughable to think he's close to Pat right now. So if you want Deshaun Watson to get to that level, you not only have to introduce some things he might be comfortable with, you got to evolve those things and take those things to the next level, because where he was in 2020 is simply not good enough anymore for the modern AFC. We are seeing look what happened. Lamar Jackson's the MVP going up against Pat Mahomes, and it still mattered that the Chiefs had the better quarterback. Chiefs had we talked about the Chiefs offense all year, how their offensive line isn't good, how their wide receivers aren't good, all this stuff about the Chiefs, all this stuff about why the Chiefs won't make it. And I sat here and told you all year, they got Pat Mahomes. They probably going to be fine, right? All this stuff it don't matter in the postseason. They got Pat Mahomes. That's how much having that dude matters. And that's how hard it is to beat a team that just simply has that dude. They could lose all the wide receivers they want. They could lose all the offensive linemen they want. They still got 15 out there in the Kansas City Chiefs jersey. And as long as that's the standard, you can't settle for what he was in 2020 if you want to beat him. You got to be better on defense than you were this year. You got to be better on offense than you were this year. And Deshaun Watson has to be better than he's ever been to get past that beast in number 15 for the Kansas City Chiefs, because the Ravens, they look like the one team to be able to do it. They had the defense, the quarterback playing at the high level, and it still didn't matter because Pat Mahomes is still over there. Just telling you what the cards are. If it sounds like a steep hill to climb, it's because it is. But winning a championship's not an easy little jog, right? Like, this is what you have to do. And I think Ken Dorsey has experience outside of what Watson's comfortable with, but enough experience with the general things that Watson is good at in building an offense around what Watson is good at, that he will be able to make something happen with him. I do think Ken Dorsey is a good hire. I know that people are going to be down on this hire, or at least I feel like some people are going to be down on this hire because it's not the big name that they wanted, or maybe because they feel like Ken Dorsey got fired and the Bills started to win games. So that means he's not a good offensive coordinator. One, it does matter what the role is. You do bring in Ken Dorsey. I do want to see you have somebody with some run game influence in there. Maybe Deuce Staley gets a little bit more influence in the run game, because I do think that was an issue. I simply don't want Ken Dorsey calling plays too. Like, I would rather it be Kevin Stefanski. Say what you want about Kevin Stefanski as a play caller. He runs the ball significantly more than Ken Dorsey calls run plays. So, like, if you want to keep that as a strong identity for your team, I think that Ken Dorsey should not be the play caller. But we'll see what happens. We'll see how these things get diced out and what responsibilities will be where as they get announced. But right now, that's what we know. Ken Dorsey is now the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. What are the specifics of that role? We will find out as that information comes out. But as far as everything else goes, that's it. That's the news. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. And let me know what you think about Ken Dorsey becoming the offensive coordinator. Do you think his experience with quarterbacks who play similar to Deshaun Watson is very useful? Or do your worries about what happened in Buffalo with him, especially as a play caller when it comes to running the ball, give you enough concerns? Or are you a little bit in the middle where you're like, hey, I like Ken Dorsey. I like the fact that he does have some experience with quarterbacks that are similar to Deshaun. But my big concern is like, hey, if he is calling the plays, we might go away from our run game completely, and our run game might not be as potent as it needs to be. So you want to see some steps being taken so you can avoid those pitfalls of Ken Dorsey. You know, I think this is a very in the middle hire for me. I don't really feel like this is a home run or a miss. I think this is something where I have to wait and see how some responsibilities are being handled out, and also how those responsibilities, what the consequences are of those responsibilities throughout the whole season. So I'm more of in a wait and see. I'm kind of in the middle here, but let me know what you think in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.